It's just a pleasure to meet all of you this morning and to join you for a really important conversation and to be amongst yourselves, I'm sure, who are very talented colleagues in your own rights. I want to start by saying that the theme for today is because it's 2016 in terms of the case for gender parity, but let you know that I guess we're coining that phrase from our Prime Minister, who said it's because it's 2015, but he said that in October of 2015. So I think you might like to know that in March of 2015, York University actually coined that phrase first because we announced our 50-50 challenge. So International Women's Day last year, March 2015, was when the Lausanne School of Engineering at York University was the first one in Canada to say the case for gender parity needs to be made, and we're going to make a bold statement and launch our 50-50 challenge to achieve 50% women in engineering. So we're very grateful that the Prime Minister listened to us and copied us. So I'm honored to help to moderate the panel this morning. I hope it'll be very stimulating for you. I'd like to introduce to you our distinguished panelists. So Vanessa Yaroki is the Assistant Vice President of TD Wealth, and she's also Director of TD's Women's Investor Program. Vanessa leads the Women Investor Program, which aims to better understand and serve the needs of women investors. And most recently, she contributed to TD's white paper, which was released this week, I believe. And it's called 10 Lessons, Women at Work, Managing Career, Family, and Legacy. So welcome, Vanessa. Next is Dr. Marie-Hélène Budworth. She is a Director and Associate Professor at the School of Human Resources Management Program at the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies. So Marie-Hélène, her research interests involve emergent workers and gender issues in the workplace. So please welcome Marie-Hélène. And we can't have a conversation about gender parity without including men. So we're very honored to have Professor Jit Sharma here with us this morning. He is Chair and Associate Professor of Civil Engineering here at the Lausanne School. Sorry? What did I say? An Associate Professor? Oh, my dearest. Apologies. Sorry. Full Professor of Civil Engineering here at the Lausanne School of Engineering at York University. Jit brings a wealth of global engineering experience to the Lausanne School, having held academic appointments in India, in Singapore, Switzerland, and the UK. He's passionate about engineering education and has won several awards for teaching excellence. And most recently, he has had great success recruiting female faculty to his civil engineering department. We're going to hear a bit more about that. So we have a great panel ready to discuss with you this important topic. So I'm just going to join them down here at the table. So we're going to start with a question which really says, why are we here? And I'm going to quote our Prime Minister, who said something back in February at Davos, Switzerland. And he said the following: diversity isn't just sound social policy. Diversity is the engine of invention. It generates creativity that enriches the world. So I may have biased our panel, but I would like to start by asking everybody, why have a panel on gender parity? Why have it now? And what really is the impact in society, business, economy, academia of gender parity? So, Vanessa. Please.
Yeah, great question. Is the mic on? Terrific. So certainly at TD, we have a guiding principle overall in our business that our internal leadership team, the way we do business, the kind of products that we sell should really reflect the needs of the communities that we serve. And the reality is women are 50% of the communities in which we serve, and banking traditionally was a very male-dominated industry. And in the wealth business, very specifically, we've done a lot of research to show that women do actually want a different experience than our male investors. And we simply were not pivoting to meet those needs. So we have done a lot of work over the last 3 years to make sure that internally we can serve the needs of those women investors. So Parity, from a business perspective, actually makes a lot of sense to the bottom line. I know that's uncomfortable. This isn't just an altruistic discussion. And of course, within TD, we know that women start off the gates 50-50. And I can say our statistics 10 years ago were, we were out of the gates 50-50, but by the time we got to senior leadership positions, those statistics were pretty dismal. Less than 15% of our senior leaders were women. And we've moved the needle. Currently, 30% of our senior leaders are women, and we do have an aspiration to support our young women to be able to aspire to leadership positions within the bank as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just to give a little bit more background on my perspective, I'm a psychologist, so I reveal that as a bias from the beginning. So that really informs my perspective on these issues in terms of what I see as important and what I see as some of the underlying factors. And I think to echo some of Vanessa's comments, one of the reasons this is critically important, not just diversity in terms of gender, but diversity in general terms, is that we know that diverse groups, diversity in whether we're talking about performance in the workplace or performance in academic settings, diversity brings diversity of ideas, diversity of thought, diversity of possibility. And so we see that it gives groups and individual and teams and people within the workplace an opportunity to do things they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So having perspectives that actually represent the vast range of people that exist in the world gives people the opportunity to learn from one another, to create ideas that are based in perspectives that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. We actually know that teams that are homogeneous tend to repeat the same ideas over and over again and don't end up moving forward, changing things, creating. So there's a real need to ensure that we have diversity in terms of gender, in terms of all sorts of things, because it makes us better. It makes us better as people. It makes us better as groups, as society. It just makes us better.
Thank you.
Well, but at the very onset, I must admit that I'm not very good with words. So I think the question was, why is it needed?
Why have the discussion? Why have it now? And yeah.
Yeah, so just to give a bit of a background of my department, the reason why I'm here. Ours is a brand new department that only started to exist 3 years ago. So it has so happened, maybe the star aligned well for us or something. This has actually never been an issue for us. Perhaps it is because we had no history. Perhaps we were fortunate enough to have people for whom this is not an issue. We don't see this as a big issue within the department. We do things in a very egalitarian, very democratic way, as my two panelists have just suggested. As we also tend to have, through some design, diversity within our group too. So we are a group of, I think within my small team of 10 professors, we have 7 different nationalities represented in terms of the cultural background. So it's already there, the diversity is there as well. So I know it's important, but if you start off with fresh ideas, it's a no-brainer, if I may use that phrase, that it should flow automatically. But that being said, the battle is lost much earlier, in my opinion. The reason maybe why we are such a good bunch and we work together is because each one of us has had that cultural background, that upbringing that basically told us, gender discrimination is not an issue. It's not to be. It's something that you do not do. from the very beginning. So, yeah. So I don't really know what more I contribute, but I mean, this has been our thinking. This is how we go about doing our business in a very kind of egalitarian, democratic way. The other thing that I want to point out is the question of leadership. So in my team, we have 1/3 of profs are female profs, and we and almost all of them are in some kind of leadership position. So, and not because they were women, because they were the best that we could look for in leading these initiatives.
So let me ask another follow-up question to you, Professor Sharma. So you said that 1/3 of the professors, teaching faculty in civil engineering today at York are women.
In civil engineering, yeah.
How many are in the other, do you know how many are in the other faculties, the other departments, sorry, in engineering? And is it more or less than you?
Oh, definitely much less. But as I said, we had this complement before the Lassonde 50/50 started. So we in fact predate Lassonde 50/50. We could claim that we were the ones who gave you the idea of a Lassonde 50/50. But I mean, the other departments are lagging behind for sure. I mean, it is. I mean, I'm not saying this is not an issue. It is an issue.
Yeah.
Much less for us because we were fortunate enough to have a group of individuals. For them this is not an issue. So it kind of snowballs. So it creates an atmosphere that attracts more such people and stuff. So so when you are starting new initiatives, it's probably important to have that kind of a foundation. Then we can, yeah.
So if I may offer, I think it's a really great example of how we can do it well.
Yeah.
I think your example is how we can do it well.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, we don't have sufficient, I guess, a number of those examples yet, but it's really great to see that one. And so this maybe ties into one of the next things for us to talk about today is what do we do today that's well and what's not so well? Because if I look at engineering numbers, for example, for almost 30 years, this dialogue has been going on. And the percentage of women in engineering, if I look at just undergraduate numbers, keeps fluctuating up and down, 19%, 22, back to 17, 21. So it just keeps modulating. And there are great star examples out there of some great things happening, but there's something happening, obviously an undercurrent that's not pushing it forward. So maybe the group can share, what do you think we are doing well, because maybe we need to do a lot more of that, and what are we maybe not doing well that is sort of holding back a real steady progress in this area? So I don't know if Professor Sharma, you'd like to take it from there, or if you'd like someone else to comment. It's whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Well, I can share my personal view on this thing. I think we lose the battle fairly early in our lives. I think this. To think that we can have that discrimination within our societies when we are being raised as kids and stuff, and then somehow when we are adults it's just going to disappear. That's not going to happen, right? So we do lose that battle early. So if each one of us leads by example and make sure that gender discrimination disappears, so basically in your own household, then eventually this will translate into a kind of much better situation moving forward. I mean, I always give this example that the battle is lost when parents walk their kids through the doors of Toys R Us. They send the boy to the truck aisle and the girl to the Barbie aisle. And that's where we lose the battle. There shouldn't be there shouldn't be that kind of a discrimination at that point. We can intervene in all kinds of level and try to correct, but that will just be alleviating the symptoms rather than eliminating the problem. That's my view.
Yeah. And Vanessa, for example, you're doing some great stuff. Do you want to talk a bit more about what you think we need to do more of based on what you've seen?
Sure. So, I think number one on my list is flipping the dialogue about this subject. So just curious, how many people in the audience have seen a recent media article or headline with the terminology, a woman can't have it all, cannot have it all? That's actually the prevalent discussion on this topic, and you'll notice it's in the negative. It's not about flipping that to say we know there are challenges, but there are equally opportunities. And what are the women who are doing it all? What are they doing? And how do we learn from that? So, if you're a 15-year-old girl and you see the term women cannot have it all on the front page of The Atlantic, penned by a pretty senior White House official who just happened to also be a tenured professor at Princeton. So her version of having it all was, being the right hand to Hillary Clinton. I'm talking about Anne-Marie Slaughter. I actually think Anne-Marie Slaughter has it all. She's a tenured professor, has a family and a great speaking career, but we still choose to have this dialogue in the negative. And I think changing that is absolutely the first thing we need to do. Yeah.
And Marie-Hélène, what's the impact to society of these kinds of messages? Like, what permeates when we have these types of headlines?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I to back it up a little bit, I think there's 2 points I'd like to make about that. The first is that we develop an understanding about what is appropriate and what is possible and what is not possible by the messages we receive from the world around us, right? So it's this, we learn socially. So we see examples of people who are doing things, we can see ourselves in them, so we believe we can achieve those things, right? So when your example is a really nice one, when we see Anne-Marie Slaughter, who arguably has
I'd say she has it all. Has
done incredibly well, saying that giving the message that we have to make trade-offs and choices, which we do, but in this sense where it's a negative and where it's going to be hard and it's not worth it and you shouldn't do it and that's the type of dialogue that flows from that. And very recently, I did a series of focus groups with young women, asking them about their perspective of career path and career going forward. And they are hearing those messages loud and clear, right? And they're thinking, no, I'm not even interested. Like this idea of entering leadership or entering executive work, not for me. Because, or it is for me, but it's at the cost of everything else, right? So I've already decided, yes, I do. I want to be a CEO. I want to be a senior leader. But I don't, that means that kids won't be for me. Right, so that's the message that they're getting from these types of conversations that are happening in the media, that there are these hard choices to make, and it's one or the other, right? So something that I think that we could do a better job of as a consequence of that is I think we could do a better job of understanding the differing career paths between different people and who make different life choices, and valuing different ways of working and contributing, right? So I think we have this achievement-oriented viewpoint on work that you have to achieve these certain levels, and if you reach this pinnacle, if you are both a professor and Anne-Marie Slaughter or Hillary Clinton's advisor, then that is the thing. Or if you can take a short maternity break and get quickly back to work and progress, that's the thing, right? We have this view of career that is very achievement-oriented, forward, constant moving, and I think that disadvantages people, anybody, regardless of gender, who make choices that are outside of that normative progression, right? So to be able to value different, if we as a world value different ways of contributing and different ways of progressing, I think we'd see a lot more choice and a lot more possibility with the ways of making a contribution.
And some of the comments this morning talk a lot about what's happening around us in society. So I guess one of my questions is, how much can we influence that? How much can we influence the marketing of toys? How much can we influence how some role models out there, whether they're frustrated or else, they maybe come across in maybe not as much as development. How do we influence this sort of belief that success is a ladder climbing? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, because how can then the Lassonde School here get to that 50-50 goal? Can one group do it alone or not? What do you think? If I would like to comment.
Yeah, so we've talked about this issue a lot at TD, and the metaphor we used, if anyone knows the Gulliver's Travels story, is you have to tie down this giant. A lot of people got to be tying him down in a different way. And that's absolutely the way to solve the problem, because it's so multifaceted and so complex. So there isn't, we don't believe there is one solution. You brought up the issue of toys, and so did you, which I think is really interesting. And I'm not sure if you've seen a company recently, and launched out of Silicon Valley, and it's really centered around the fact that girls do tend to learn through stories, not through realistic play like little boys do. So, when you think about trucks and cars, what was happening there is it wasn't that little girls were not interested in trucks and cars, it was that they weren't interested in that kind of play. So the company was launched, and it was a story about building a building, and the little girls participated in this story, created characters as part of this engineering feat. So they were able to, think outside the box and come up with this great solution to engage little girls in engineering kinds of toys in a way that mattered to them. So it wasn't about trying to make a little girl a little boy. It was about truly understanding what that difference was. And that's a fascinating story, because that particular company didn't get any funding to launch. So the women that started it had to run around raising money from other mothers and female-owned VCs who really understood that this was a problem. So we all vote with our dollars. So I'd say, thinking about those things as we do vote with our dollars is really important.
Did you want to add anything? Or?
Go ahead, I'm still thinking.
So that was a really great example. It distracted me from the question.
Oh, okay. Well, I love this imagery about tying down the giant. I would reflect that I would feel the same way in terms of this is a very complex problem. And so how do you orchestrate all the different facets to actually succeed? So I guess that was the sort of crux of the question. If it is so multifaceted, then how could we actually make progress at this stage?
Yeah, I think we are making progress. But I think it's slow, and I think that's why it's so hard to see, right? Like I think that progress is the increasing number of examples, and I know that's slow, but every example that we see gives the young people coming up behind that individual opportunity. I think that as time, hopefully, and I don't mean to imply that time will solve this, because I actually don't believe that. I think that there's a lot of work to be done, but I do think that providing adequate role models, really holding up the people who are doing great work and making those examples available to people and obvious to people, I think changes the way we see things, right? Like when I say the word leader, something pops into your head, right? We have these automatic notions about what things look like. So I'll back that up a little bit. When I say the word tree, a tree pops into your head, but depending on what part of the world you lived in, a different image of a tree pops up, right? So if you grew up in Jamaica, as an example, you might get a palm tree. If you grew up in Canada, you might get a spruce tree that pops up in your head, or a maple leaf. But it's the same with leaders. When we say the word leader, there is an image that pops into our head that is the dominant visual of what a leader looks like, right? It's the Bill Clinton, it's the, those types of images. And as we start to see more trees and have more examples of people who don't look like the traditional visual of a leader, we'll start to change the things that Dr. Sharma is particularly concerned about, which is the root causes of these inevitabilities, right? Of these things that are happening.
I think, Marissa, there is a need to do something about it, but I think the conversation has to be had at a more fundamental level. The society has to, hold discussions and redefine the meaning of success, as pointed out. Success can, just to give you a tree metaphor, success can mean different things to different people as well, and women tend to view success differently as men. The danger or the flip side of putting examples in front is that you almost never get the full story with these examples. So you might see the front end and you may like it, but there may be quite a lot of story behind these examples that you may not like. So there has to be some balance there. Right? You cannot. When I was reading the TD white paper, and you talk about the mentors and the mentees, that's a great idea. But then it has to be a very honest and very sincere, mentoring and arrangement, so that the mentees are essentially given the whole 9 yards as to this is what it is, this is how I've reached where I have reached, and it's a highly personal thing. I think one of the requirements, I think one thing that we absolutely must do is to uphold the choice. I think keyword is choice here. It's entirely up to the individual, be it man or woman, to choose. If we start imposing these models of success on the people, that you take away that choice from them, to some extent, yeah.
I think what you're raising is very interesting, and I want to paint a bit of a timeline and get the panel's input on sort of unintended consequences of the work which is done in a positive way to try and encourage women. So let's say we have a young girl, she's studying math, studying science, and we're encouraging her to continue to do so. And a few of them continue and they go further into high school and they study their maths and sciences, and we are successful maybe in encouraging them to study engineering. And so we create an environment that they hopefully can find leadership and find support and succeed, let's say, through the undergraduate engineering education. So we know we've already whittled down the numbers, but there are some there. So then they enter either academia or they enter the workforce. And if we look at some of the statistics in engineering, we'll see that maybe about 20% women graduate in engineering in Canada, but about 12% become licensed engineers. So something happens out where they start to work, where there are things that influence them, and they say, I want out. I don't want to continue. Or they pursue academia, let's say that path, and then we see the numbers as well in terms of women in academia, let's say back in engineering again, less than that number. And so they then choose that they're going to exit. So I guess one of my questions is, this is all being done in a nurturing way, in a positive way, in a way to build success, but are there unintended consequences, and what do we do about that, where we're actually maybe not setting up those women for paths that they thought that they were going to be on? So just your thoughts on that.
Can I just add to the statistics that you just pointed out? So 20% of women graduate from engineering programs, and approximately two-thirds of them go on to get the professional engineering license. See, that statistics equally valid for men. If you look at the data, yes, there are 80% men graduating from engineering, but 2/3 of them go on to become professional engineers. Not all of them become professional engineers. So it's not that different. Not everybody is cut out to be a professional engineer. They go on to get an MBA or start their own company, or I don't know, write a book, become a successful writer. So that the statistics are very similar, because we have had a look at this, and typically only 2/3 go on to become professional engineers. So that's not a big issue in my opinion. The reasons of not becoming professional engineer could be different, but the statistics are very similar.
And so whether we're talking about men or women in those scenarios, what about the messaging and what about the expectations that's being set up for them? What are your thoughts on that in terms of, so whether they're becoming engineers or whether they're exiting the workforce, actually the full workforce? What are your thoughts on that? I'm just asking, do you think that there are unintended consequences or not?
Yeah, and this is an issue that we explore quite a lot in banking and capital markets in particular. And there's really two issues that emerged. And the first is this idea of unconscious bias, that in the workplace there are unconscious biases that we may not realize. The example of what a successful leader looks like, for example, the 6-foot-tall guy with broad shoulders and really deep voice, and then I show up. So not what you expect, right? So socializing leaders in the organization to be aware of their unconscious bias is one way certainly to help women to change the work environment so that that's not a pervasive problem. And that's certainly a lofty goal and one of the Gulliver's tactics. But in the short term, the reality is that the unconscious biases do exist, so what do you do to help? And frankly, you actually have to make women really aware of what those obstacles are. So something that we do at TD, for example, as part of our Women in Leadership initiative, is we talk about how men actually hear messages. And a really practical example is men tend to be very fact-based. So when you are making an argument to further your business case forward, you need to be very fact-based, a little bit black and white, not use terms like, I feel that that's unfair, but the numbers show that A plus B equals C, and therefore Y. So actually having that critical, difficult discussion that there are skills women need to survive in that environment, while at the same time trying to drive towards changing the environment overall.
There's two things that you said that made me think of some things. I think there's something in psychology that there's a type of discrimination that exists where people think that they're being helpful to you, right? So, no, I don't think we should ask her about that opportunity because that would take her away from her family for a month, and that would be really unfortunate, right? She wouldn't want to do that. We don't want to put her in that position, right? That's kind of it's a well-intended idea, but it's completely inappropriate, right? So that happens. That's a problem as well, where people are behaving in ways that they think are very supportive, but are actually undermining somebody else's ability to somebody else's access to an opportunity, right? So that's something that I think everybody needs to be aware of. That there's always a need to ask and to give people choices. The second thing that you made me think about was around the skills that men and women need within the workplace to be successful. Men and women are socialized to behave differently, right? So men are socialized to behave in a certain way, women are socialized to behave in a certain way. If we behave in ways that are outside of those prescriptive sets of behaviors, we can be penalized, right? So if I behave in a way that is viewed as hitting a masculine behavior, let's say that I'm viewed as a bit too aggressive in a certain situation, I can be penalized, right? Somebody, either you don't like me, or you think that I'm one thing or another, right? So there's actual social penalty for behaving in ways that actually can lead to success. So as an example, something that I've done a fair amount of work on in terms of some studies that I've run is self-promotion, right? Self-promotion helps people become successful, right? If you can tell somebody that this is what I did, this is how I did it, this is how I got from A to B, and I, everything worked out really well. There's nothing in that statement that is boastful or arrogant. It is merely a statement of fact. But women are not socialized to self-promote effectively, right, or in a strong way. So I'll tell you, just if I could, very quickly, a study that I did that I think, like, it just screamed, this is a real problem. We looked at income within a unionized setting. So this should be a fairly tight income range within this organization. And we looked at values towards modesty, right? So because we know that women are socialized to be a little more modest than men. And women who I'll just, instead of saying values towards modesty, I'll just say modesty, but know that we measured values, not actual behaviors. So women who are modest earn less than women who are not modest. That makes sense, right? Because it means that we see self-promoting behaviors, that somebody's out there saying, this is what I did, this is what I did. I'm a rock star. But with men, we actually saw the opposite effect. So men who are modest earn more than men who are not modest because they're still self-promoting in a way that is socially acceptable, and they're not crossing over into that arrogant, boastful space. Ridiculous, right? So it's kind of crazy that there is a financial penalty, or there's financial consequences, rather, for behaving or not behaving in line with your gender norms. That's not a helpful comment. It doesn't move us forward. But it's very interesting to me.
Just very quickly, you mentioned engineering and the workforce model, right? That can also be problematic for, from a woman's point of view. But that is one of those things when you say, okay, I'm going to train you to get absorbed into workforce. Women tend to balk at that model. Women are looking for opportunities to change the society and all that. That workforce model doesn't quite get you there. And this is our philosophy in Lausanne School of Engineering. When we say Renaissance engineer, right? We are not really training engineers for a workforce. We are training engineers that will make those societal changes happen and happen in a positive, including and respecting the diversity kind of ways. So that's something that has to be put out there, that this is not just about training, absorb into workforce. We are more than that.
Yeah, no, it's a great comment, because to lead an expectation that you will then go into this place, like, so here's a circle that you need to fit into, for example, right? Then that absolutely could not succeed and could not allow the woman the chance to succeed. So I really appreciate what you added, Professor Sharma, in terms of a new way of teaching to allow students to think that they're getting a skill set for them to create that future for them, and then that way they'll navigate, to the success that they're looking for. Yeah, that's great. I will ask a question of the panel in terms of men. So how do we bring men more into the equation, more into the discussion? I mean, we have a great audience today. I see lots of men in the audience, which is wonderful. Sometimes it tends not to be that way. So we have some engagement, but do we have enough engagement? So one of our last questions is just your maybe brief thoughts on what more do we do in order to make sure that we are having men involved in the conversation, or further taking action?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a controversial answer to this one. Certainly, we can encourage men to be sponsors and all that kind of thing, but sometimes in this area, women really are their worst enemy. And what I mean by that is, if we're going to do more at work and in our communities, the work at home doesn't go away. And women have some pretty high standards around those things. So, share a conversation I had with a friend actually on Wednesday night. Her husband changed the baby diaper, and she was complaining that he changed it wrong, and she didn't like the way he changed it, so she's gonna change all the diapers from now on. And I said, well, did the diaper work? What, was it okay? She said, yeah, it worked, but it wasn't lined up, and I liked it lined up. And I said, if you complain about that, he's never gonna change a diaper ever again. So just let it go. The diaper worked, the baby was comfortable. It's not the end of the world if the diaper was not lined up. So we do have to learn to let go at home a little. My husband set the table last night and he did it totally wrong. And I thought to myself, I'm not gonna say anything because I'm gonna set the table. So we do have to let go and let men do stuff at home and accept when it's not perfect or to our standard.
As long as they show continuous improvement, right?
I think that's a great point. Everybody should be given opportunity to learn by doing, and a bit of encouragement every now and then also helps. It's not just about criticism, but also encouraging that, that was a great job. The soup was delicious, something like that.
One of the principles that we teach in Renaissance engineering is to fail fabulously. So I think that works well. Yeah. Please. Please.
I think that's a great example. I think it's a wonderful example. The so it also teaches the next generation that you're raising in that household something, right? It also teaches the next generation that there are lots of ways to get things done. When mommy's going to do it this way, daddy's going to do it this way, and that's just fine. I would add something else to this idea of how do we involve men, and the notion that I'd like to present is the idea that I don't think men are terribly happy with the state of affairs either, right? I think they would like some more choice. We've done some work, some research with young men as well, and they would love some choice in terms of how they lead their careers and what success means and what achievement means. This idea of having to be in charge and having to achieve a certain level in order to be successful is a stressful idea, right? So I think that kind of reinventing our standards and reinventing how we view the world of work benefits everybody. It's good for everybody. I think there's a lot of to do outside of the world of work, and I think everybody can be enriched by if we are able to value some of those things a little more heavily for both genders.
Absolutely. This is what I meant by choice. The choice is for everybody, and we get to choose, what we want to do with our lives. It's just. And the other thing is, this whole example that is part of the, the thing that need to happen. That you got to lead by example. The kids are observing you 24/7, and if you're leading by example. I give you my own example. I'm the eldest brother, the only brother in the family with 3 sisters. And my parents never ever made my sisters kind of feel that they were different or something. We were all raised the same way. All 4 of us are highly qualified, and they led by example. My grandparents on the other hand didn't. But somehow my father and my mother, they got that in their mind that this discrimination has got to stop, and it stopped, and we just observed and learned. So that's where that real change has got to take place, in my opinion, and then everything else kind of becomes a little bit more easier as we go forward.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give you a chance for one final statement, as brief as possible, but call to action. It's really important to then take discussion into action. So we're going to invite dialogue with the audience in a minute and take questions, but maybe in even just a couple of words, if you can, what are your personal calls to action on this topic? So,
oh, that's a tough one. I'd say find a young woman and tell her that she can have it all. Don't tell her that it's going to be really darn tough, but encourage a more positive dialogue around this subject.
Great. Ready?
Yeah, I think just be the example, show people that around you that they have choices. Show young people that there are lots of choices, and that whatever you choose is the good way, is a good way to go, right? Like that there's lots of different ways of having a career and living a life, and if you can find fulfillment and connection with others, there's a lot of good ways to do that.
Good.
Yeah, and then kind of adding on to that, through example, actually make this whole issue disappear. I mean, that's the key here. I mean, this is where we give ourselves the credit, because we have actually made this issue disappear in our department. It's not an issue. It's a given. And we have done that through leadership, through examples, through our ways of working together, and so on. So, and I suppose other departments can look inwards and learn from our examples. So, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to help me thank our panelists this morning.